Rick Green, he is the founder of PatriotAcademy.com. He's also a former Texas state rep. Rick, the mask stuff. I try to explain to people this is never going to end. People have told me throughout this pandemic, of course it is. It'll end when this, after 15 days. It'll end vaccination. It'll end this. It'll end after the election. And I'm telling people, Rick, it's never going to end until people just stop complying. There's not going to be a time where they get sick of this.
Yeah, you nailed it, man. I mean, look, let's go back to March of 2020. I mean, everybody's finally asking the question, what does government actually have the power to make us do? Well, back in March of 2020, we started asking those questions when Gavin Newsom dropped the first statewide stay-at-home order in the history of America. And then all of a sudden, Republican and Democrat governors alike started following him. I mean, they fell like dominoes, including my own dictator-in-chief, Greg Abbott of Texas, who actually said, get this, Jesse, he said in his executive order that he had the power to control the ingress and egress of every living human being in Texas. Now, if that is not an exaggerated abuse of power, I don't know what is. That is tyranny, and it's happening from Republican and Democrat alike, whether it's the shutdowns, whether it's the masks, the vaccines. They are using public health to violate our constitutional rights and completely eviscerate them. I can't think of a part of the Bill of Rights that has not been violated in the last year and a half, and also that the courts have not defended. They have also failed us by not defending our constitutional rights.
Okay, one, we'll get back to Greg Abbott in a minute, but I'm glad you brought up the courts here. Rick, I don't want to be too pessimistic. I always try to be realistic, but not bring everybody down. You're right. The courts left us high and dry. Who's left, bud? I'm sorry. I'm looking around. Looks like we're running out of friends here.
No, man, I'm like you. I'm not usually pessimistic. And back in March and April, my tune was a little different. I was saying, okay, we're going to give them a little bit of leeway here, but we've got to clamp down quick. We can't let this thing get out of hand. 17 months later, I mean, I'm at the point where I'm saying civil disobedience is the only solution at this point. We have to say no, hell no, we're not going to do it. And that's got to be not just us, the citizens. That's got to be state legislators. That's got to be mayors and sheriffs and county commissioners on the local level that are willing to say, not in our backyard. You're not going to bring this tyranny into our community anymore. That's what it's going to take to shut this thing down.
Rick, you brought up Greg Abbott, and obviously Texas matters a lot to all of America. It really matters if you're on the right. And yeah, Greg Abbott absolutely sucked during this pandemic, and he's not alone. There were plenty of Republican governors who sucked as well. Frankly, there were plenty of Republican senators and congressmen, and honestly, Trump wasn't very good, especially in the beginning of it. Why did Republicans fall for this thing so quickly?
You know, man, I mean, they always tell us personally that when we face crisis, it reveals our character. Doesn't just build our character, it reveals our character. I think the same is true for culture, society, and elected officials. They face crisis, and then you find out what they really believe, what are their core principles. And to be honest, Republicans, for the most part, are morally bankrupt. Not as bad as Democrats, okay? Let's not put them on the same page. But there's not enough Republican leaders that actually govern from a place of principle, where they actually say, hey, here's what the Declaration and the Constitution says. Here's what I believe. We're a constitutional republic, not some democracy or not some republic where we just elect people to do anything they want. I'm willing to be bound by the words on the paper, an actual constitutional republic. There's so few of those right now because we stopped teaching that stuff 50 years ago. So it's really revealed the fact that people like Greg Abbott do not have the core principles, the constitutional convictions to take on the tough fights. And he cared more about the national polls because he thought he was going to run for president. I'm hoping that getting 0% at CPAC twice in a row has disavowed him of that. And you'll notice he's now governing far more conservative, thanks to Alan West and Don Huffines for running against him. But, man, I think it just reveals where we are in the vacuum of leadership in America.
Why the disconnect between Republican leadership and the Republican voting base? Because it's not just the D.C. thing. You just brought up Greg Abbott. Greg Abbott isn't in D.C. Any one of them. The people who lead this party always, for decades it's been like this, seems so disconnected from the people who make up their voting base, almost like they hate them or something.
Yeah, man, it's like an abusive parent or something. I mean, it's an awful situation. We've dealt with it for years. But I got to say, it does come back to us as individuals. You know, like I was saying, it reveals the the character or the cracks in the foundation. I mean, the reason we're in the mess we're in, whether it's the COVID crackdowns, whether it's the Marxist BLM movement that we allowed to take place across our country, what's really the problem underneath is civic ignorance. That's the problem that has been festering for decades. And so we don't know our rights. Therefore, we don't perceive when they've been violated, and we don't defend and assert them. That's John Jay, first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. And that's where we are. We've got to individually get back to studying first principles and understanding what actually produces a free society so that we can better form our own communities, our neighborhoods, and then at some point our states and our nation. But man, we've got to come back to understanding what actually produces a good society. And we are civically ignorant right now. The good news is Tom Jipping says ignorance is curable. So we can solve that if we'll just start getting back to learning these things. Amen. And then get in the trenches, which I'm fond of you saying. We've got to realize what we're up against right now. This is not some high school debate, man. We're in a culture war right now. The left, they've been in the trenches for decades. They've been scratching and clawing, and that's why they're winning. We've been playing tiddlywinks and acting like we're in some high school debate, and that's why we're losing. We've got to get in the fight.
100%, and the stakes are high. Hey, thanks so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you liked what you saw, go ahead and like and subscribe. You heard me. Like it, subscribe. You'll get a lot more of it and a lot more of me.